So thank you, Mari, for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to be talking with you, and I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes.
I am delighted to be here. Carol, thank you so much for having me.
So to start with, I think it's beautiful to kind of set the context that when we're talking about the desires that we have in terms of our sexuality and our love life and our relationships and feeling good in our bodies, often we can go straight to like the tips of technique, like what wearing lingerie and how to use an ice cube, what to do with your tongue, what kind of position, that sort of thing. But I think it actually is so powerful to actually start with the context and the kind of our environment. What is the environment inside us, and what is the environment kind of in societies, in our family groups, in our cultures, how those things play a role in what our sensual and sexual experiences are.
Yes, I so agree with that. That context, intention, even the awareness as to what is it that you want, and in getting better at intimacy, if that is such a thing, because we tend to go like to be goal oriented, right? And so in all the learn to give blowjobs, or be the best lover in 3 steps, or do these 5 things, and we are so rushed to thinking about all the things that we need to be in order to get something. And we forget about ourselves. We forget about the true desire underneath all of it. Like, what is the true desire in pleasing your partner orally?
Yeah.
When think about that is connection. And that brings me to how connected are you to yourself? How connected are you to what it is that you need to have that complete context, not just the pleasing, but where are you in the whole picture? And yes, I know, like getting the lingerie and getting the the toys and reading about how to do things and helps, but also how connected you are, and how safe do you feel in your body to even do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of think of it like our inner ecosystem, because there can be shame, and there can be excitement, and there can be fear, and there can be things that you can't even quite articulate, but they make you feel stuck or kind of held back in some way, as well as pleasure and joy, and the joy of connecting with another person, and all of those kind of qualities really play into our sensual and sexual experiences. But I think really paying attention to that inner world and the society and the context that we live in actually has a much bigger impact than we realize. And you were saying something about true desire or genuine desire. What was the word you used? Do you remember? Authentic desire?
Authentic, something like that. Yes. Yeah. And yes, I mean, I know that when we are in relationship with somebody else, we tend to go to, okay, how do we please this person? Because our ultimate desire is more intimacy, is to grow in in the relationship. And then we get, you know, like all the shame because we want to make it work, and yet we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel good enough to go there, to go, you know. So the intimacy is, it's part of it, it's being really raw and authentic, and allowing the other person to see you in all of the lights, in all of the facets, and all of your colors. And admitting that, you know, we have the intention to be intimate and to love them, and yet there's shame, and yet there's pressure, there is, you know, the pressure from society, the pressure from everything around us to look, to do certain things, to look a certain way, to say things that, you know, we really don't want to, or don't want to do it in a certain way. So I go back to what is it that I want, and how intimate I am with my true desires. And sometimes we are on the same page, me and my partner, with the things that we want to do in our relationship. And sometimes it takes me time to get there. So it's like, yes, I want to do it, but I want to take it slow, or I want to explore deeper. You know, what would it mean for us to do that? Like, what would it mean? What would it look like? And I'm not talking about getting the lingerie or getting the toy or doing the thing. It's like, what is it going to do for us?
Yeah, I think that's such a key thing that you're illustrating, that say the surface, or the initial desire looks like what we were talking about, using blowjobs as an example. So the initial desire is, I want to feel good at giving my partner a blowjob, and for them to really enjoy it. But what does that give you? Like, why? And what kind of going underneath? Is it about sharing pleasure? Is it about wanting a deeper connection? Is it about wanting to try something new? Or what is that? What do you expect that experience to give you in your interaction with that person, whether it's in a relationship or some other form? I think that actually understanding that this thing that I want is actually because I want to have like a deep, beautiful connection with my partner that is going to last over time is different than I want to have good technique.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said. It's that had to do with the shared desire to do the thing, and arriving at this place that feels good to the both of us, or however many people are involved in that relationship, right? And it's not just to just out of pleasing, because oh my God only knows how many times we have done things just to please, and just to get it over with, or it's just because that's what you do in relationships. And so it has, for me, in my experience, it has taken me a process of unlearning and listening to exactly what it is that I am hoping to get out of whatever experience, especially when it comes to my sexuality, because as I know many can relate with what I'm about to say, I have lived a very, I guess, unconscious life where my sexuality was based mostly on the pleasure of my partners and very little on my own. And so, it has taken me this long, and I think it's a journey to examine the intention behind things, intention, into in that very thing, like why is it that we want to do something with our partners, and checking in to make sure that that inner environment that you were talking about at the beginning is conducive for the things that we want to do. One of those elements is being safety, feeling safe, feeling safe in our bodies, feeling that there is enough intimacy to feel safe to have an open and honest communication with our partners and say, I like it to be slow, or I can do this much today. To have that dynamic feedback, real-time feedback. And it sounds so simple, but it's very difficult.
Yeah. And I think safety is so underrated when it comes to sexuality. And there's so many layers to it. It's kind of, that includes your internal sense of safety. And do you feel safe and secure inside yourself? And it comes on the layer of the relationship of, is the kind of structure of your relationship and the culture within your relationship something that feels safe? And then there's the kind of broader environment that you live in. Do you feel safe in your everyday life and how that impacts you? It's such a, but it doesn't sound as sexy, but I think, like, from my kind of embodied experience, safety is sexy. And actually that makes me curious, what, on a kind of embodied sensational level, what does safety feel like in your body?
Yes, I love that question. I love learning to pause. That to me, it's the first indicative and signal that I am in a safe place, when I'm able to take a second to check in. I know that I don't feel safe when I answer right away. I mean, there are occasions when I'm so sure I've done this before. I'm extremely safe, feeling safe with the person that I'm with or in the environment, that I will answer right away. But oftentimes, especially in intimacy, I want to be able to take as long as I need to.
Yeah.
And I want to know that it is okay to take the time. And so when I'm able to take that time for myself and check in, that is my first signal. And then I go in my body and I feel the sense of being grounded. I feel the sense that I'm actually feeling my feet on the floor, or I'm feeling my shoulders, or I'm aware of the posture. I'm also aware of the speed at which I'm talking. So yes, all of those tell me this is safe for me.
Yeah.
What about you? How does safety feel in your body?
For me, it's kind of the absence of tension and bracing. So even as you were talking and describing the slowness and being able to pause, I felt my belly soften and my shoulders kind of soften. And I took this nice, one of those exhales that's like, and you just kind of settle a bit more. There was that kind of feeling of my body being more relaxed. And also noticing that my face is relaxed, especially my jaw and the muscles around my eyes. Like if it feels softer and more relaxed in my face. And maybe like a fuller, smoother breath. And I'm trying not to describe it in terms of, because sometimes it's easy to focus on what does it feel like when it's not safe. which is useful to understand, but it's also useful to be able to kind of visualize or conceptualize what it's like to actually feel the thing you want to feel.
Yeah,
I feel but there is that lack of bracing, because when you mentioned the word pressure before, pressure from us, pressure from the people we're engaging with, whether it's real or perceived, pressure from society that kind of becomes our own internal pressure. I think we use that word pressure, I think really that resonates with my personal experience. That's one of the things that does a number on my experience of sensuality and sexuality. So kind of the abs, and I kind of end up bracing for, if I say or do something my partner doesn't like, is he going to get upset? Or I put pressure on myself to have an orgasm easily as quickly as I want, and that feels like you know, that there's like a tension and a like squeezing and a trying.
Yeah.
So that safety is that real softness and relaxation. And it, for other people, it depends maybe on where they habitually hold tension in their bodies. But I just kind of wanted to paint that picture that safety can feel, there's kind of a spaciousness, a relaxation, like my breath can flow. It just feels soft to me, at least in this moment. It doesn't mean that I can't feel excited at the same time.
Yes. And it's so funny that you mentioned that talking about blowjobs and safety, it doesn't really correlate and it's not sexy, but it's so fucking sexy when you are into that softness of your body and into that connection to how nimble and spacious each part of your body feels. It feels yummy. And especially when you mentioned about around your face, guess what? We're going to use our faces to give blowjobs. So having that relaxation around the jaw comes with safety. Because if you are in a pressure environment for whatever reasons, the blowjob is not going to feel good. And let me tell you, my ultimate goal is for every woman to enjoy whatever oral pleasure they're giving to their partners. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say for anyone of any gender, enjoying giving oral pleasure would make the world a better place.
Absolutely. We will be at it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, like I was gonna say, taking the job out of the blowjob, it would be like, yes, honey, let me give you one. Yes.
I tend to hold a lot of tension around my jaw and my face, so it is really interesting to hear you say that, because that's one of the things that doesn't always feel comfortable to me, is it gets uncomfortable in my jaw and in my face. But as I was, even for people listening, they couldn't see you, but as you were describing enjoying your body, there was this like suppleness and almost kind of like beautiful serpentine movement that you were making that just looked so luscious.
Yes, you know, when we talk about, the more we talk about feeling safe in our bodies and how that invites this space to experiment, to come from that place we were talking about before, the intention, more than, oh, I am going to do this thing, I'm going to give him a blowjob. I find that is if you like steps, I find that is step number one, to getting really into your body and feeling into how soft and pleasurable, you can find pleasure in different pockets of your body. And I find that from that place is where we can get into power. And I find that power is like number 2 in that sequence of things that that help us, right? Get into the mindset, get in all on board. The physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, the energetic body, all on board and all in the same party bus so that we can all have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what your definition of power is.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I think about power, I think about the ability to get in contact with your sovereignty and feel safe enough to say yes to the situation or say no or even say maybe. So power doesn't have to be necessarily a physical thing. For me, it's more connecting the dots that when there is something uncomfortable or something that just doesn't jive, I have that sovereignty in me. I have the permission, I have the allowance to say, wait a minute, I need a second, or let's just call the whole thing off.
Yeah.
And I think that happens after we feel safe enough in our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. Because often in that particular situation, the fear is, at least for me and a lot of the people I've worked with, the fear is around upsetting the other person and losing the kind of connection with the other person if I say no or I want to stop. And that can be really uncomfortable. And to actually genuinely feel like you can say no, and however they respond, that you can handle their response. That does make it, to feel like that's a genuine option, that then you feel like you're really genuinely choosing the situation. And to me, power is about, in broader terms, like you said, the ability or the capacity to live life on your own terms, to create the experiences you want, and to not do things you don't want, in simply. And that is when you apply it to sexuality, to really fully live into the desires of what you want, but to have that clear boundaries and safety to navigate it the way that you want, the way that feels good to you, to live in a way that is more about how you genuinely, authentically want to live rather than what society has told you should do.
Yes. Beautifully said. Yes. And I think it's such a dance between safety and power, because the more you're aware of your power in the choices that you have, whether it's to stop the situation or to continue the situation, the safer you feel. And so it's like one feeds the other.
It's more like a cycle, rather. This is not necessarily like a linear process that we're going through, right? It makes sense it's helpful to kind of conceptualize it in these steps, but I do find that when it comes to our personal growth and healing, it's not very linear. It can be cyclical, and it can also just be like all over the place. It has its own direction and wisdom and timing.
Yes. I want to share something, a personal experience with reclaiming no.
Mm.
And it was playing a fantasy with my partner, and I asked them to sit patiently and to invite me to sit on his lap, and that I would say no. I would say no. And I asked them to please be patient, and that it's not personal, but that I needed to rehearse over and over saying no. And I found that so healing for myself. And I know this tool would be healing to other people. But it gave me the chance to know that I can say no in different and using different tonalities of my voice, even using different acting out my no, like putting my hands up or putting my hands on my hips. But saying no, even though I do know this person, I love this person, and it's okay to say no sometimes.
Yeah.
And that he would love me and he would still want me, even though I said no.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. And to be able to actually play it out and it's not like a conceptual thing anymore. You've experienced in your body what it is to use my voice and to use my gestures and my body language, and then to live out what his response was and to get that kind of embodied evidence. That's really powerful.
Yes, I was looking in the ways that I could rewire in my brain saying no so repeatedly, because I've experienced so many times that my no hasn't been honored by sexual partners and otherwise by other people. And to have this, and even though it's not a real life situation, it is training my brain, right? And in all the ways I've said no repeatedly and have it be okay. Yeah,
that's really beautiful. And that's a great example too of the way that safety and power feed into each other.
Yeah.
So we've also talked about previously how we often think of the giver in a blowjob scenario as being in a more submissive, less powerful role. I'm curious what you think about that and what you see the real power dynamics as being, or what they could be, where one person is giving a blowjob and the other one's receiving it.
I love that question. And yes, I used to think that way, that the shame around giving a blowjob and being in that submissive, I guess, even though that was the person I was with by choice, but at the same time, I was doing something that society has said repeatedly that was kind of degrading. And, all the other conditioning around giving blowjobs and how I have been shamed, or other women have been shamed for being in their full expression of sexuality. And so how disempowering that was, to believe that. And what comes to mind in from a submissive point of view is that in order to give power away, you have to know your own power. And in BDSM communities, I've heard this term, of being submissive, been, like so common, but there's also that polarity that in order for you to be in that position, you have to know your boundaries, and knowing boundaries is having ownership over your body, having ownership of knowing what feels good and what feels bad, and having the language or having some sort of signal that would let the other person know that that's not okay.
Yeah.
And so that blew my mind, because then the submissive is, in the BDSM context, it's a role that you play, and you play it by choice. And so if we can bring that to a non-BDSM scenario, that you're, at home with your partner and you don't have that lifestyle, but you're more of a, non-BDSM person, then, knowing that what you're doing is, it's a beautiful thing with the intention of wanting to get closer and connecting more with your partner, and that you always have the choice to stop the situation or to stay longer in the situation, and to have it be as yummy and as delicious as you want it to be. And so under those conditions, you can call me submissive all day long.
Yeah. But especially that kind of tying it back to what you were saying about really having the power of genuinely being prepared to say no, and genuinely being in that situation by choice really opens up the power to participate and be present in that dance with your partner in a more empowered way.
Yeah, I love what you said about being present. Being present is another signal that you feel safe.
Yes. And in your body, able to feel your body's sensations and feel your breath and have some level of relationship with those things.
Yeah.
So if the first step is safety, the second step in this non-linear adventure is power. What's the third step?
Well, I would say then you start getting into more of the technicalities, right? So more of the using your senses to know what is it that you like and want to receive and explore. And so if we're talking about blowjobs, I want blowjobs to be very enjoyable to myself. I don't want just the pleasure to be for him. So I have discovered this thing called pleasure mapping, and I have mapped my my pussy on my lips. And so I started that practice with my finger, just tracing the lips and making them very sensitive to the touch. And like when I'm putting on lipstick or chapstick, just feeling into the different pressures and feeling into all the textures of my lips. My lips are super sensitive now. They weren't that, I didn't feel much before. And so then taking it inside my mouth and actually mapping again my pussy inside my mouth, and gaining a lot more sensitivity, and then taking it back into deeper in the throat, and cervical, throat orgasms are very connected to the cervical orgasms, and they feel very pleasurable to me. And I know that a lot of people feel that gag reflex, and that is something that, you know, it's very individual. But I graduated from my finger mapping my lips and my mouth to using a toy, a dildo. And so then it became more realistic, the dildo and a penis. And I, you know, this is how you take ownership of blowjobs, right? And it feels incredibly, incredibly pleasurable to explore deeper into your mouth, and having those throat orgasms are delish.
It really it's a whole, I hadn't ever thought, when I thought about receiving or feeling, experiencing pleasure while giving a blowjob, I thought more about the way you might move your body, or the way that you or your partner might touch your own pussy, or if you have one, or the kind of having nice smells or nice light, or those sorts of things. I hadn't really thought about sensitizing your whole lips, mouth, and throat in that way. But that is a process I've gone through with my own pussy, and now I'm like, oh, because I get that the underlying principle is that you can build sensitivity, you can train your body for sensitivity. We have that neuroplasticity, that ability to change our experience in our bodies with practice and intention and time. So that's kind of like opened up a whole new world for me. When you say you mapped it like pussy mapping, how do you mean?
And so I don't think it would translate, you know, the anatomy of your pussy onto your lips, but sort of imagining that your pussy lips are mapped onto your lips on your mouth. And so, I mean, you can trace your lips and sort of imagining sensations in your pussy, inviting pussy to come into conversation with the sensations you're feeling on your lips. And so it does require imagination and tapping into the felt sense, right? And so how can I touch my lips so lusciously that my pussy engages? It could be a delicious game that you can actually play any day on occasion, and people don't need to know that you're actually mapping your pussy lips onto your onto your lips.
I could imagine an intermediate step as well, where you had one hand on your lips or your mouth and another hand on your pussy, and you were kind of like stimulating them together to kind of link up those. That would be an interesting exploration. But that word exploration, I think, really is really useful here, because even as what you're describing is none of what we've been talking about is you do one practice or you change one thing and overnight it's different. We're talking about kind of a practice, a way of life, something that is, in my opinion, well worth investing time and energy into, but it does take time and energy and intention. And I think thinking of it as an exploration, as play, as driven by curiosity. Like, curiosity is one of my favorite kind of driving values. That makes it feel so much more like it takes the pressure off to me and makes it feel much more enjoyable and playful. And even just, there was something that you were describing earlier about playing with your partner and just the idea of exploration. Like, what if we thought of our sexuality not say engaging with a partner, not necessarily as like have sex, do the thing, have an orgasm, but like a play and exploration of our bodies. What can they do? What can we experience today? What can we dance with between us? That brings a whole new quality to me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like my head just exploded because I used to orgasm just by masturbation. Like I couldn't, I'm talking about back in my 20s when I was a newbie at this. And like the variety on the menu now, it's so amazing. It's so cool. It's like, oh my God, my body is so capable of feeling. And like you said, it's a practice. It totally is a practice. And you can make it it's even sexy. It's actually really sexy to bring the play and to bring the curiosity.
Yes. Yeah, so when I think about play and curiosity in my body, I get a little bit of a kind of a smile and kind of a cheeky squint in my eyes. And I feel kind of a rising energy that's maybe a bit tingly, a bit warm, kind of from my belly up through my chest. There's kind of like a rising, lifting sensation, and maybe a little bit of a impulse to kind of move my spine back and forth or sway it a little bit. I don't know. It feels more alive.
Yes. Like I'm smiling so hard, my cheeks hurt.
Yes.
Because how beautiful it is that we're having this conversation about how to, like, if you will, how to give better blowjobs. But we're talking about our pleasure first, and we're talking about how do we feel safe? Like what are the ingredients to get there? But we're talking about ourselves first. Like we are not talking about the 1, 2, 3 steps in order to give the blowjob. I absolutely love it. This is totally what I want for every woman or every individual out there who wants to like feel, good when they're in their full expression of their sexuality.
Yeah. And even as you say that, like how exciting it is to have this conversation, it makes me think kind of in the broader cultural societal context, being in the year 2021 now, we do have a lot more freedoms than our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. And also I know you and I, our families come from different places, different experiences that they would have had as well. But just it's actually relatively recent in our history as humans, at least within the past few thousand years, that we can have this kind of freedom to explore and talk about that. And I feel really grateful for that. But also it brings up this kind of drive in me to make it more safe and more accessible for all kinds of people. Because not everyone we all have kind of relative privileges around access to this work and safety in doing this work.
Yeah. Yes. I'm so thankful that you brought that up, because it is real, and I can speak only from my experience, which is I'm a Latino woman. And yeah, I can only imagine that my mother never had this opportunity to be involved in such conversations. Even when I say, when I bring my mom into this conversation, I just feel like, oops, is she listening to this? No, she won't be listening. And yeah, I think it's so important that we have more conversations like this to to make it more normal, and to talk about, you know, all the different pressures and all the different conditions and the different resources that we have nowadays available to us. Yeah, I mean, I know many in from, like I said, being a Latino woman, I know that there are many that don't feel is okay to talk about, to have this type of conversations, that you know, for whatever reason, their religion or their families don't allow it, and yet they are, you know, they're wishing things were different. So I'm very glad that, you know, we are having these conversations, and that is accessible, relatively accessible to the masses. Normalizing the conversation, sharing resources so that people can get informed. Yeah.
And that, as we've been talking about the kind of context and ecosystem that our sexuality lives in, we've talked a lot about kind of our inner context and our inner ecosystem, like my own experience of shame and excitement and discomfort. But that's connected to the experiences of the generations before me and the society that we live in, and that just the water we swim in, the air that we breathe, and what our families' experiences have been before us. And so I think there's something actually quite radical about reclaiming the pleasure in a blowjob, you know, especially for those of us who have been socialized as girls and as women.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I want to just scream from the rooftops that, you know, we have access. And again, I also would like to acknowledge the privilege that we live in this age, where it's kind of okay, at least in where I'm located, to say, yes, I'm a sexual woman, I'm a mother as well, and I belong to this society, and I can hold so many, you know, paradoxes, and none of that defines me, and I can live life on my own terms, going back to having the sovereignty and knowing where our power resides, and co-creating the type of intimacy, the type of relationship that you want to have with yourself and with others.
When we said the word paradox, I also felt another big exhale. I think there's a real power in claiming that I can be two seemingly opposing things at the same time. And I'm not going to try to make myself choose between them. I'm just going to occupy both of them. That's huge that's been something very significant for me personally.
Yeah. That has been also a huge thing for me, and I'm still grappling with that. I get stuck. It's sometimes really sticky for me to be okay with the whole of, you know, the two opposing terms or views, and being okay with not labeling myself, being okay with being all of it all at once, and not being anything, not being defined by any of that. And I think that is part of the you know, integrating that generational trauma, and it's defining how we live life nowadays. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about everything that we've talked about in the context of, at least, so I grew up in the US and now I live in Australia. So I speak from the perspective of those cultures as a white woman. The experiences of feeling like if you look like you're enjoying sex too much, then you're a slut. And on the other side, you don't want to be a prude. And so there's one kind of bind. And there's the message and the expectation that for you to be desirable, you have to know what you're doing in bed and be really sexy and make your partner happy, and it has to look a certain way. And there's all of these constraints. It's like you should be this kind of sexual in this kind of situation with one person who is your sworn partner. And like you said, all that pressure, like you mentioned something about feeling like not enough at the beginning. That's one of the things that comes up for me a lot, is feeling like if I'm not sexy in this way, if I don't experience pleasure in this way, if I don't perform in this way, then I'm not enough. I'm not a good enough partner. I'm not a good enough woman. I'm not desirable. And all of that kind of, whether we believe it consciously or not, it kind of seeps into us.
Yeah.
So there's so many layers to reclaiming that safety and that power. But I think I just wanted to illustrate the importance of understanding that context. It's not like, if we feel shame because we don't feel sexy or comfortable giving a blowjob, that's not like a personal failing. That's an evidence of all of the influences that we've experienced over our lives that have hidden or suppressed or made wrong parts of our natural sexual enjoyment and expression, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes. I so resonate with that. And it brings me back when you said that one of your main driven forces is curiosity. And so when we apply that lens to everything, it puts shame to shame, right? When you bring the curiosity, let me put on my curiosity glasses on. And shame doesn't exist, or it kind of minimizes, it takes the charge out, because then you have space.
Yeah.
All of a sudden there is space to show up and be and feel whatever. Anything goes. This is the game where anything goes. And the more I try to separate safety and power, the more I get reassured that the two go together. But I do have to acknowledge that for me, feeling safe in my body was like the most basic foundation to even begin to feel curious. Because there was this inherent, like this, I wanted to brace. And when I knew that there was a genuine desire to expand, and I had the curiosity wasn't able to come onto the show because I didn't feel safe to explore. I didn't feel safe to show myself as I am.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So if there was someone who is at that stage of feeling really braced, really protected, really without access to that kind of curiosity, where would you start?
What has moved the needle for me has been getting into the felt sense. So playing with in the realms of somatic experiencing, which you have been demonstrating all throughout this conversation. You have been speaking out loud. The felt sense. What is it that your body is saying? And I love this foundation of breaking down the thoughts and the feelings into sensations in the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It brings the awareness and it helps us to become detached of outcomes or even the belief that may be running the show at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that when people get the opportunity to understand and learn the language of the body broken into sensations, I think that's like the first step to know what safety, qualities of safety feel like in your body, and learning to learning what are the places that feel good to you, feel like this is home base to you, places that you can come back to when things get intense. And even for those people who have, I carry trauma in my body, and so it was a process to feel safe in the body. I resorted to having resources outside of my body, and that was like my very initial step. Then I took it into the body, and then I reclaimed power, and that is something I still do.
I can see a smile spread across your face as you say that power is mine.
Power is mine, baby.
I think that's a really powerful invitation to go into the sensations in the body. And I find too, I think you alluded to this, but if I have a thought, I'm not good enough, or an emotion like shame, if I can focus on what are the sensations in my body, and maybe I experience the feeling of I'm not good enough as like a clenching in my throat and my shoulders curving in and like a tense heaviness in my chest. Translating those things into sensation for me takes away a little bit of their charge. It's kind of like they're less scary or intimidated when they're translated into sensations, and that makes them a bit more accessible. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And in releasing some of the charge around the thinking or that thought pattern, is what allows for the space to be curious. Right? It's what allows for like to show up, and in taking like that attachment. I must let this thought of I'm not good enough go. It may take a while for that thought to evolve into something else. And when we start gently and at the pace that feels good to us, I think that's what invites for the space.
You've used that word space a number of times, and every time you say it, I feel like the inside of my chest open up and my body soften, like, oh yeah, I like having space. It's like the antidote to pressure. It's a very, very nice feeling. So I do have, to sort of change the direction a little bit, I do have one kind of technique question for you around blowjobs. And that is, do you have, and I ask this because, like I said, I get a lot of tension in my face and my jaw. And sometimes I lose connection to my pleasure because I'm kind of uncomfortable in the position that I'm in. Do you have any favorite positions that you find conducive to your own pleasure for offering a blowjob?
Oh, yes. Well, my personal favorites, my personal favorite is when I'm kneeling on a plush cushion and he's sitting comfortably. I have full range of using my arms, you know, I may be playing with myself, or I may be caressing his body. And I also have control of how deep I go.
Yeah.
And having free hands, you can also, you know, play with more sensations in the penis. So it's not just you going up and down. His penis, you can also get breaks, you know, like if you're just concentrating on the head of the penis and playing with the hands at the base of the penis or the shaft. So that may give you a break, you know, to your jaw. So your mouth, it's closer. It's not totally shut, but it's not as open. And yeah, I mean, there are so many other positions, but that is my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you even specified the plush cushion, because I love sensations and all my senses. So like having a nice smell in the room, a nice temperature, just imagining like the cushiness and the softness of something under my knees. It's like, okay, I can get into this.
Yes. Yes. It is so important that you're in a comfortable position. So important. Yes. Absolutely.
So I have one more question for you, but before that, I would love to ask how people can find you, how they can work with you, and what kind of offerings you have at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. My handle is marideluna_empowered. And there you can find links to my website. And at the moment, I'm offering free consults, one-on-one, for those that feel called. I am in the works to birth a jade egg course in the next month or so. So I will make sure to put all the information, all the juiciness on my Instagram account.
Yeah. Anytime I look at your photos, I'm always inspired to like really own my own erotic nature. There's like a deep sexiness, but also there's like, you can feel kind of the weight of the power behind it, like you really own it. So that's what inspires me.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I think it's part of the part of reclamation of power and in understanding that I can be in my eroticism, but I'm also soft and gentle, and I think I embrace in that you're anything you want to be and making it okay.
Yeah. Anything you want to be and make it okay. So my last question is, if there was one thing that you would like people to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
I would say that I really would love for anyone and everyone listening to this to live their sexuality and express their sexuality under their own terms, and to define What I'm trying to say is it's to do the things that you want to do in your sexual intimate life, feeling amazing about it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's part of that power reclamation that I am so driven by.
I can see your face light up as you say that.
I did so many things I didn't want to do for so many years that that is my mission nowadays.
Yes. I think the thing that I would like people to take away, I have like 5 things running through my head right now. I think that a lot of permission for slowness and spaciousness in this exploration. Those qualities of slowness and spaciousness feel really nourishing and healing and sexy in the way that we were talking about safety being sexy. So that's what I wish for everyone.
Yeah. Safety is the new sexy.
It is. Safety is the new sexy. Safety is the new sexy. So thank you, Mari. I really enjoyed this, and so much delight, but also so much depth. And I really hope that everyone listening feels inspired to approach blowjobs in a new way, if that's something that is part of their sexual life, and to really reclaim and own what is rightfully theirs in their own bodies.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for having me, Carol.
You're welcome.